How can we avoid polarization during a conversation? Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology and HR. My name is Gerhard Orband. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, specialized in international, intercultural and multi-language contexts. Well, what is polarization? Imagine you are with your wife or your husband. The wife wants to buy a new handbag. Now, probably you will consider this a stereotypical comment on my part. Why shouldn't men buy rucksacks and handbags? But we stay here with the stereotype because the whole conversation will be stereotypical and it reflects the reality in many households worldwide. So the husband immediately reacts and asks, what will it cost? And the wife becomes triggered. Why do you ask? Do you think it's too expensive? And so on. And very quickly they are in an argument. Now, what happens? Each party exaggerates the intentions of the other party. So the husband may accuse openly or covertly his wife of being financially irresponsible, a spendthrift, whereas on the other hand, his wife will consider him stingy. If you asked both participants separately, they would describe their own positions and values completely different. The wife would say that I'm not a spendthrift, I'm financially responsible, I just want to enjoy life at least once a month or so. And the husband probably would not consider himself stingy because he is financially savvy, because he wants to have enough money for the family vacation, or maybe he even wants to invite his wife on an expensive dinner. So, but quickly in any kind of conversation, if one part doesn't like what the other person says, immediately in our minds we exaggerate the opponent's position and we're creating a divide which is very difficult later to bridge. Now, what could we do about this? Well, it's a recommendation that is at least 2000 years old, and it consists in trying to interpret in the other direction. So imagine you have a colleague that is always negative. Whenever you make a suggestion, a proposal, your colleague somehow seems to shoot it down. Now, no, this will not work. I'm not sure if people will like this, and so on. Now, the typical reaction would be we need to get rid of such toxic people in our team. They are killing our momentum, our group energy, and so on. On the other hand, you can try very hard to see the positive intention here. So in many situations, in business life, but also in family matters, there is the danger of so-called group think. That is, a group makes a decision, but individual members, they hold back their opinions, critical opinions, because they don't want to jeopardize the group atmosphere. So this happens very often in politics. A typical textbook example in social psychology would be the American invasion or failed invasion of Cuba. But quite recently we have excellent examples with the Iran conflict, where it turns out around current President Donald Trump, there are a lot of people who are yes men. So the president is surrounded by people who agree with almost everything he says, at least when they are meeting. And then later on, everybody is wiser, but people don't speak up, and this happens in typical business situations every day. Not always with so tragic consequences for human life and the world economy. So in such having this groupthink in mind, it's worthwhile cultivating outliers in your team, in your company, people who are, who will not say yes when everybody says yes. And you can, or should, I think, also validate those people to a certain extent and value their good intentions. And, well, we appreciate that we have somebody who is more critical or thinks about more consequences and so on. For example, there was this Fukushima nuclear power plants disaster following a tsunami, which had been actually predicted by Japanese experts, but in the respective meetings, committees, and so on, those voices were shut down, like being irrational, negativistic, and so on. So sometimes it's good to have such people. This doesn't mean that they should dominate the discussion and so on, but often people we find negativistic, they will become much less negative if we just acknowledge their good intentions. But often also negative parents and so on, in their hearts they have good intentions. They want to protect their children and so on. Now, I know that that's very difficult. And my homework for you would be to start with the most difficult but most accessible, because, well, of course you can practice this at your job, in a board meeting, meeting customers. You can, in your mind, try to reinterpret in a different direction. I suggest this, but sometimes you will be caught up by your own role because you are a participant. I would suggest to practice first with videos. Of course, we don't have access to company meetings, but a good surrogate often is politics. Now, I know most of you will say politics is dirty, negative, and so on, and I agree wholeheartedly. However, as training material, it's excellent, and I would do the following. Pick news or YouTube channels by people that are opposed to your current views. Watch interviews with politicians you emotionally dislike. Also people of other religions you don't like. And try to listen to them and see, well, where do I actually have a common ground with those people? Let's say, for example, you're a very traditionalist religious person in a certain denomination, be it Muslim or Christian or Hindu, and you listen to a preacher from the opposite religion or a different religion. Now, maybe you find something that you can appreciate. For example, that both of you care for so-called family values. Because, for example, the typical divide in many European countries is between, and in America, between like Christians and Muslims, or between right-wing populists and Muslim migrants or Latino migrants. But actually, if you look at their values, they should find some common ground. So many of those migrants they also hold so-called conservative values, and it's just and they have on the political spectrum much in common with those right-wing nationalists. So they probably would also vote against same-sex marriages and against abortion and so on. And on the other hand, if you are for multiculturalism and so on, and well, you can find in your opponent also things that you value both. And that's hard work. And I don't recommend you change your religion or your political orientation. But if you try this as weightlifting with the most difficult cases for you, emotional cases, then it will be easier with the relatively simpler cases at work. What do you think? Please tell me your comments. See you next week. I wish you much success. And if you want me and one of my colleagues to make a free masterclass online for your company on communication psychology, please contact me. We can arrange this almost any time. Bye-bye.